No Vacancy by Gloria Gaghan. I've never had much of a nesting instinct. If I had a soulmate in the animal kingdom, it would probably be the emperor penguin. There I'd be, fearlessly going out into the Antarctic waters in search of food, while my poor schmuck of a husband stayed at home, sitting on an egg. On the other hand, I'm not a great swimmer, so I'd probably wind up being eaten by a killer whale. And what would happen to what had originally been my egg and my prospective offspring? Well, how much confidence would you have in a partner who's too stupid to feed himself, never mind a kid? Still, on a human level, I didn't have much to recommend me as a mother and homemaker. I hadn't consciously wanted to be either. I had almost no taste for romantic fiction, and my favourite parts of the women's magazine short stories that were popular at the time always came before the heroines met Mr. Right. But, of course, hormones kicked in. Dave was tall, dark, and handsome, with many of the other cliché attributes. But the clincher for me was his quirky sense of humour and unpredictable take on the world around him. I didn't just want to live with him. I wanted to be his wife, and for him to be demonstrably and publicly mine. Which is why, at the advanced age of 22, I found myself marching lemming-like down the aisle. I loved playing house and discovered an unsuspected talent for cooking. A tip for new brides. While no one except your mother-in-law will compliment you on a polished kitchen floor, everyone except vegetarians will go into raptures over a really good homemade pâté or something Italian that involves absolutely no tomatoes. Just clean the bathroom, bar guests from the kitchen, and use candlelight for all other public areas. With this approach to life, I was pregnant within a year, and pregnant again 14 months later. It's no use screeching that no one could get pregnant on the 24th day of her cycle. I did. And I know other women who played the same sort of biological odds and wound up with very large stomachs. I'll skip over the next 24 years that followed. Unless you had household staff and a nanny, a mere au pair doesn't count. A lot of you probably went through the same swings of pride and exhilaration, or fear and exhaustion. The reward was two good-looking, poised adults who'd made it through third-level education. Eric on a casual low second in French and German, and Aisling with first-class honours in biochemistry. Eric found a job in London with a major international bank. Aisling took another year to get a brilliant master's, then joined a research team at a huge pharmaceutical in Kildare. More significantly, both moved into their own apartments. Eric's rented, Aisling's bought as a first step on the ladder. I couldn't get a grip on what magazine writers called the empty nest syndrome. I mean, what was the problem with having our household reduced to two people who were still more than fond of each other? In theory, we didn't need 3 bedrooms, but I was gradually converting Aisling's room into a study for me, leaving her bed free for Christmas visits, and putting twin beds into Eric's room for the occasional guests. It was, well, comfortable. Then the recession sneaked up. It's embarrassing to say this when so many people were already suffering real hardship. But at first it didn't affect Dave and me all that much. Our mortgage was paid off and we'd never had enough extra money or the inclination to get involved with stocks and shares. We tightened our belts a bit when Dave, as a permanent pensionable civil servant, took his budget cuts. We tightened them a lot more when I lost my part-time secretarial job. But our belts had started out loose. Instead of moaning, we would say smugly to each other, "Oh well, there are a lot of people worse off than we are." Then the phone rang. Eric had lost his very, very well-paid job almost 4 months ago. He hadn't told us because he didn't want us to worry. But now his rent was 7 weeks overdue, and his credit card debts totaled over £3,000. Would it be all right if he moved back in with us until he found a new job and got himself sorted out? 4 days later, he was at arrivals in Dublin Airport, dragging 2 large suitcases and a laptop which seemed to be surgically attached to his left shoulder. "Don't worry, Mum," he reassured me. "I can give you a hand around the house." A glimpse at the inside of one of his suitcases should have tipped me off. Everything had been folded and packed with military precision. It didn't take long to realize the terrible truth. Against all genetic odds, we'd produced a crazy clean neatness freak. Maybe that Montessori preschool we'd sent him to had been a mistake. Dave found the newspapers he'd dropped by his chair, reassembled and placed on the coffee table. I woke up each morning to a spotless kitchen. The dishwasher or vacuum cleaner or washing machine seemed to run non-stop. What's more, Eric's eating habits had changed after a few years of living on his own. All but the leanest red meat was out. Chicken, seafood and salads were in. Everything had to be seriously fresh and preferably organic. "Mum, this fridge is a biohazard," Eric pronounced, as he threw perfectly good, well, okay, maybe borderline, food into the bin. After a few weeks, Dave and I were starting to feel like slightly irksome house guests in our own home. The one domestic skill Eric hadn't mastered was cooking. His life in London had trained him to speed-read menus at upper-end restaurants. For empty evenings, he'd worked out which Chinese, Indian and Thai takeaways were worth eating. Pizza was beneath consideration. Sending Eric to the supermarket for messages was financial suicide. The same €100 that would buy me a full shopping cart at one of the discount stores didn't go very far on fillet steaks or sea bass, asparagus tips, artisan breads and decent wine. I took back the culinary reins and ignored Eric's pained expression when confronted with curries or pasta. Eric took to disappearing a couple of nights each week, muttering something vague about friends. In a treasured period of being alone, I asked Dave, "Just how much extra do you think Eric has piled up on his credit cards, and how soon do they get maxed out?" "The hell with Eric's debts. Have you seen our last electricity and gas bills? I'm spending more at the supermarket, even though I really am being careful." Dave put his arm around me. "We may have to put off that long weekend in Mayo." Anger rose in me like lava from a dormant volcano, but all I could find to say was, "I don't think it's healthy to put chemicals on every available surface." Of course I calmed down. Even if he hadn't been my son, I would have felt sorry for anyone sending out at least a dozen CVs every day and getting, with luck, maybe one acknowledgement a fortnight. Recession, and why the hell didn't anyone call it a depression, was nipping at our middle-class heels. But it wasn't really biting until Aisling called round. Her face was serious, but then Aisling had looked serious since she was 10 years old. Dave was quicker than I. He asked, "Have you been made redundant?" "Certainly not," Aisling bristled. "I'm far too good at my work." But don't ask me how I knew what was coming, or how female emperor penguins know when they have to return with food for hubby and that bloody egg. "You know, I bought that apartment just before the property bubble burst. I mean, it seemed like the best way to get on the ladder. But the mortgage is huge. I've taken a 20% reduction in my salary and I just can't handle it. And I can't sell because I wouldn't even get enough to cover the mortgage." I could see Aisling reach for her cigarettes, then stop, Dave and I are and translate that as anti-smokers. But a small, petty part of me rejoiced in my perfect daughter having at least one flaw. Anyway, Aisling continued, I thought that if I moved back here and rented out my own place, I could manage to ride out this bloody economy. Did we agree? Does a bird feed its young? But afterwards in bed, Dave said, I love them, but I hate how self-centered they've become, and they don't even know it. I blame the Celtic tiger. I thought of all the chauffeuring over the years, the piano lessons and tennis coaching, the endless homework supervision. I said, we did it to ourselves. And I finally drifted to sleep, thinking of cold, cleansing, Antarctic waters.